We see meteors on average one or two per night, but tonight we're expecting to see one a minute for most of the night from 12 o'clock when it's really dark up until sort of 3 or 4 in the morning.
What causes it?
The sun has rings around it rather like the planet Saturn, and these rings are made of dust, and occasionally the Earth flies through one of these rings, and as it flies through the rings little bits of dust burn up as they enter the atmosphere. Commonly known as shooting stars. They are little bright objects like stars that move. They only last a second, they'll sort of suddenly appear, move and disappear. It's just a little bit of dust or a little grain of gravel that moves through the atmosphere at maybe 25,000 miles an hour.
That is some speed.
It is some speed.
Yeah, because it's the sort of thing tonight where you don't have to be into astronomy like you are to enjoy something like this. There's lots of people.
No, you
don't. Do you need a telescope?
You don't need a telescope. You don't even need binoculars. The best way to see them is from a sun lounger. If you can lie down and look straight up at the sky, you stand a much better chance of seeing one, because you're not sure until they arrive exactly where in the sky they are.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, given the vastness of the whole thing, I mean, have you got any idea of roughly where they will be?
These are called the Perseids because they all originate in a constellation called Perseus, which is in the northeast. So they will appear to be coming from the northeast, but they'll be brightest directly overhead. So if you can find a seat so you can sit down and look straight up, you do stand a better chance of seeing them.
So your day presumably is all geared to the fact that you'll be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at midnight?
Oh yes, yes. Yes, the trouble with a sun lounger, of course, you do hear people snoring quite loudly.
And in terms of how long will this show go on for then?
Well, it's been going on for a week now, and it reaches its brightest tomorrow night. We do expect to see some tonight. We expect to see quite a few tonight, and we expect to see a lot tomorrow night, and then it will tail off towards the end of the month. So it's quite a big cloud of dust we're flying through.
Does it depend on where you are geographically as to how good a look you're going to get at this, Alan?
It depends on how much light there is around you. If you're in a city with lots of street lights, you're only going to see the very bright ones. If you can get out to a park or get out into the country where there are no street lights, you will see a lot more. I would say tonight and tomorrow night, if you're out in the country, you might be seeing one a minute. If you're in the town, you might be seeing one every 10 minutes.
And when you're laid on your sun lounger watching them, how good a view are you going to get, do you think?
It's always a guess. They will appear sporadically once every couple of minutes, and then you'll suddenly get a dozen come across in a few seconds, and I always seem to be looking the wrong way. I hear people shout, "Look at that," and when I turn around, I've just missed it.
And I mean, you're an expert. I thought you would know exactly where to look and when.
Yes, no, the older you get and the more you do, the less you know.
Are you, I mean, is there much good footage caught of these on video?
They tend to use still cameras with long exposures, and they leave a long stripe across the film. If you process the images, you can get the radiant. They all appear to radiate from a single point.
Okay.
It's rather like looking into along the railway track. You know, you get the perspective, and they tend to move apart from a central point, and that central point is in Perseus, which is why they're called the Perseids.
And somebody like yourself who's been into astronomy, I remember you telling me from being very young, when you look at photographs like this, is it telling you anything new, or is it you saying, oh yeah, we saw that last week, last month, last year?
If you have the correct instruments, you can tell what material they're made from. It's possible to do a chemical analysis of them in a camera. But of course, if they survived till they hit the ground, you can then collect them, and then you can take them to a laboratory and subject them to all sorts of tests. And they've been about in the solar system for maybe 10 billion years, and it does tell us what the solar system was like that long ago. They are the building blocks. The actual Earth, the planet that we're sitting on, is actually a collection of meteorites that have all bumped into each other until they've created this huge 8,000 mile diameter sphere.
Wow. Have you been part of, you ever seen one, touched one?
Yes, I do collect meteors, meteorites.
How big are they roughly?
Well, the biggest one I've ever seen is the size of a car. But that's in Africa. It's so big you can't move it. It weighs about 50 tons. The biggest one in my collection is the size of a cricket ball. And I do have some smaller ones. Some are more rare than others. I do have a tiny fragment of the Tissint meteorite, and it's only as big as a grain of sand, and it cost a lot of money, but it's actually part of the planet Mars. A giant asteroid crashed into Mars many millions of years ago, and the debris was scattered into space, and some of it reached the Earth and landed on the Earth. And chemical analysis shows it's made of the same material as Mars, and the little gases trapped inside it are the same as the Martian atmosphere. So we are 99.9% sure they are part of the planet Mars.
That is some discovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Occasionally the Earth is hit by a very large meteorite. The ones that I collect, as I say, cricket ball size, but occasionally they're the size of a house or the size of a mountain. And 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were wiped out by a very large piece of rock that crashed into the Earth and virtually wiped out the atmosphere for several years. Whether you would call it a meteorite or a shooting star, I don't think you would, but they are in the same family. They are large chunks of rock, and there are still large chunks of rock up there, and we do need to be careful of them. And there are groups of scientists with telescopes who are plotting these pieces of rock. Yeah. And the hope is that if we do find one coming this way, we'll have time to build a rocket and send some sort of team out there or a robot out there to deflect it.
I was just thinking while you were talking, if something could come and wipe out all the dinosaurs, what's it stop it happening to all of us?
The common consensus is that it will happen. It happens roughly every 100 million years, and it's been 60 million years since the last one, so it might be 40 million years till the next one, but it could be tomorrow. There are groups in NASA and ESA who are already making plans to send little outboard motors out and move these things about so that they actually miss the Earth.
Wow. So there would be a way, would there be enough notice to be able to get something to, I mean, you said about building a rocket, I mean, presumably that doesn't happen in 5 minutes, does it?
No, they got to the moon in less than 10 years. From the time of Kennedy saying we're going to do it this decade, and they did do it, and that was a huge technological feat to do in such a short time. Many of these objects that we're looking at, they're tracking them 30 years into the future. And a few years ago there was a notice put out that there's one going to pass and possibly collide with the Earth in 32 years' time. That's like 20 years from now. But as we have refined its orbit, we find now it's actually going to miss the Earth by about 1 million miles. So we're not worried about it. The longer you watch them, the more accurate you can. When you just get two photographs of it, one here and one here, you're not really sure where it's going. But when you've got a third and a fourth and a fifth photograph, the track that it's moving along becomes more accurate.
Because when you talk there and talk about millions of miles, I mean, it's very difficult to get a handle on this. So it is for me anyway.
Well, 1 million miles is 4 times the distance from here to the moon. So it's so far away. It will be close enough for us to be able to study it through telescopes and binoculars. It will certainly be an exciting day to go outside and watch it. You'll see it go past. But it's far enough that its gravity won't affect us, or it certainly won't damage the Earth at all.
So we don't have to worry too much?
No.
Yeah. Because the other things I keep hearing is people talking about the amount of junk there is out in space. Is this sort of stuff that's been left behind? It's a bit like when there's a war, they leave tanks in the desert.
Exactly. Whenever you place a satellite into orbit, the rocket that takes it there is discarded. And consequently, there are something like 10,000 satellites up there at the moment, most of which are defunct. The batteries have gone flat, they've become obsolete, they're no longer needed, but they can't bring them down, they just leave them up there. So there might be 1,000 there working, sending television signals out, and there'll be another 9,000 defunct ones, and another 10,000 motors that carried them up there, and they're all in orbit. And only 2 days ago, the crew of the International Space Station had to retire to one of the lifeboats because a piece of space junk passed within a few yards of it. The area that we're interested in now is the area beyond Pluto. We've recently had a spacecraft fly past Pluto, and it's gathered so much information it's going to take it 18 months to send all the information back to Earth because it's got such a small, weak radio on it. And then from there it will move on to another Pluto-like icy planet, dwarf planet, and there are maybe 10,000 to 1 million other dwarf planets out there, and we now know what Pluto is made from. In a year or two we will know what the second one is made from. If they're made of the same stuff, we could probably take a guess and say they're all very similar, but if they're different, we've then got to ask the question, all these objects up there, and there could be millions, are they all different, and what are they made from, and what can we learn from it?
I mean, I can see the fascination and the interest, and certainly for somebody like yourself, for whom it's a hobby that's taken your life over. But in the broader term, what will this information, how would it be useful to society today?
The information about the planets may not have any practical reason, but the information in building the rockets and learning to steer the rockets, the instruments that we design to send into space do spill over into, for instance, medicine, the scanners that everybody is so used to using today, where they're posted through one of these little polo mint devices. That was originally designed for looking at stars, and it's so efficient that we can now look at the inside of the human body with one, and it's probably saved thousands of lives.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I mean, I saw the other day, it's only just over 50 years since Telstar was launched, the first communications rocket. That was groundbreaking at the time. You think of what's happened in those 50 years.
Well, India was criticised because India launched a satellite, and they said this is a third world country, it doesn't have the money, why does it need to go into space? The answer is simply that India is such a big place. To install a telephone system would take something like 1 million tons of copper for the wires alone, and India couldn't afford to put telephone wires all across its continent. But to put a satellite into orbit and to give people, every village had a satellite phone, and it did it at a tiny fraction of the cost of installing telephones.
Because I mean, they used to talk about the space race, didn't they? That the Americans and the Russians were cheek by jowl, trying to make sure they were the first to do this, the first to do that. And for all the fact that that was political, did it achieve anything in terms of pushing the boundaries?
It pushed the boundaries on missile technology. The rockets that the Russians send up now almost every month to the International Space Station are almost identical to the rocket that put Yuri Gagarin into orbit, and that was only an improvement of the one that put the first Sputnik up. But the important thing about the Cold War, they were tied up spending money on the space race instead of building rockets and instead of fighting. And it took the war into space instead of on the planet, and very few people got injured. I know a few astronauts were killed, but no soldiers were involved.
Is there anything that you one day want to hear has been proved, disproved, whatever else it is? Is there anything left out there, Alan?
Are we alone? Are we the only intelligent species in space? One way we might achieve this is to put a radio telescope on the far side of the moon, because any radio telescope on the surface of the planet is deafened by the radio and the mobile telephones and the television signals that fill the atmosphere. The other side of the moon is clear, and we could actually possibly hear somebody listening to I Love Lucy on a planet 1 billion miles away.
Do you think it's actually likely that there is someone out there?
I think it is likely, but I think that they are so far away that we will never be able to talk to them, never be able to visit them.
Yeah.